All right, everybody, welcome back to Bare Bones Talk. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff this evening. There will be some discussion about trans rights and some stuff that's been happening in the news related to transgender people and how they're treated by our society. Um, Before we get to that, though, I'm hoping to have a guest speaker return to help explain how that affects the trans community from a person who's actually a member of it. But in the meantime, there's plenty to go over, so let's take a look at the news, shall we? Okay, so, going with the Associated Press, we have a whole bunch to talk about this fine evening. And let's start with the Catholic Church having a bit of a problem, which has been an ongoing issue for a while. You've probably heard jokes about about kids and the Catholic Church. You've probably heard that clergy are often less than stellar in how they treat kids. And the abuse cases have been piling up for a very long time, and quite a few have gone unreported for ages because the kids were told by the clergy that this is their fault and they've had trauma in trying to deal with their abuse at the hands of clergy. And in a lot of cases, the statutes of limitations have run out before the kids can actually report this stuff. For some reason, the Catholic Church has been entrusted with the task of policing itself in this regard, which strikes me as kind of a fox guarding the henhouse kind of thing. But with a lot of places extending the statute of limitations to allow a greater look-back period, the Catholic Church is currently being overrun with cases that they have to process. And it says, the Vatican Tribunal now overwhelmed by clergy abuse cases. Let's take a look. The Vatican office responsible for processing clergy sex abuse complaints saw a record 1,000 cases reported from around the world this year. That's 1,000 for 1 year. And still some regions that haven't even reported their allegations yet. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith is overwhelmed. That's the organization that the Catholic Church uses to investigate these things. They don't have enough people to process the unbelievable avalanche of lawsuits and accusations and criminal cases that are being filed against them. Monsignor John Kennedy says, we're effectively seeing a tsunami of cases at the moment, particularly from countries where we never heard them before. Which is not surprising because in a lot of cases the Catholic Church has a virtual stranglehold on the congregations in regions of the world that are not so first worldy. So that's not surprising that a lot of people are reluctant to describe that. He was referring to allegations of abuse that occurred for the most part years or decades ago. Argentina, Mexico, Chile, Italy, and Poland have joined the U.S. among the countries with the most cases arriving at that congregation known as the CDF. So it's just a nightmare. Vatican office lifts veil, revealing vast caseload of abuse. So yeah, it's unbelievable that this number of cases exist, and that despite that, for some reason, the Catholic Church is being trusted to discipline its own and to take action against the clergy who committed these things. These horrible crimes, these abuses, these sexual assaults, and all the other words of that type that go with it. Just amazing to me that the countries that these cases are being leveled in aren't sending them to criminal courts, because for some reason, because this is a faith institution, the governments of these countries seem unwilling to just arrest the guys and throw them in jail, which I think seems to be the correct course of action. It doesn't seem appropriate in any way, shape, or form to let the organization whose personnel committed the crimes actually be the ones to be charged with, disciplining them and prosecuting them if necessary. But what do you expect? It's a hypocritical world out there, and a lot of bizarre stuff happens. So, we'll see as the months unfold here how the Catholic Church happens to deal with this. I did read elsewhere that the damages payouts for this are estimated to be greater than $4 billion that the church is looking at, and that's not even if all the cases turn out to be valid. That's if even a fraction of them turn out to be valid. So I think the Catholic Church is really staring down the barrel of a giant legal cannon here, and is not likely to come out unscathed in the end, like not even remotely. So, as you're, I'm sure, aware at this point, the House of Representatives decided to take its vote, and the vote they did, and they voted to impeach President Donald J. Trump, which was obviously the right thing to do. Trump, on the other hand, did what he usually did and handled it in a mature and presidential fashion, and who am I kidding? He totally didn't do anything like that. He took to Twitter and he freaked out and seems to be targeting people who have previously been his supporters when they realize that Trump is awful and finally take a stand against him. One of the primary ones of which is an evangelical Christian magazine called Christianity Today, which published an article calling for Trump's ouster from the presidency. And Trump lost his mind over that, because the evangelical vote has been a very big deal for him. So what does he do? He goes on a rampage and tries to divide one branch of the evangelicals from the other, meaning any evangelical who supports him from any evangelical who doesn't. And we get this. Trump blasts Christian magazine that called for his removal. Now, you may remember, not too many shows ago, I pointed out the horrible fact that the Republican voters who support this clown, and the politicians who support him, etc., are setting the stage for their own demise, for their own devastation. Because with Trump, his entire platform is based on saying he hates the same people you do. I mean, that's basically all he offers. And assuming that he is successful and he creates a Trumpish Republican utopia, where he gets rid of all the people that typical Republicans hate, people who aren't white and people who aren't Christian and, whatever, people who aren't heterosexual, people who aren't cisgendered, who's left? Just people who are part of his base. And yet, eventually, even those people will see what a horror he is, and he will turn on them too, just like he's doing now. It's just happening sooner than most people would have predicted. So yeah, he's already turning on his own constituency by taking a massive crap on these people at Christianity Today who dared to say that he should be removed from office. The editorial from Christianity Today said he should be removed from office because of his, quote, blackened moral record. And that is about as obviously truthful as you can get, and Trump lost his mind. He says, and keep in mind, this magazine was founded by the late evangelical preacher, the Reverend Billy Graham. He said they would rather have a radical left non-believer who wants to take your religion and your guns than Donald Trump as president. Because that has anything whatsoever to do with what Christianity Today actually said. They didn't say we want an unbeliever. They didn't say that they want to take your guns away. None of that stuff is true. But Trump seems to have what I can only describe as an arm's length relationship with truth and facts, so it doesn't surprise me that he would tweet something like that. He continued by saying the magazine, quote, has been doing poorly and hasn't been involved with the Billy Graham family for many years. He later questioned whether the magazine would prefer a Democratic president to, quote, guard their religion. So, yeah, and what's amazing is Billy Graham's son, the son of the guy who founded the magazine, actually turned against the publication that his father founded in order to support President Trump, which is just bonkers. What are you going to do? It's all a bunch of infighting and backstabbing, and it's just the beginning of the end. It's the tip of the iceberg for what he's going to do to anybody, even from his own constituency, that dares not to support their leader. It's very North Korea of him. But the editor of the magazine fired back, saying, let's watch. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it, but it basically says he did what he was called to do, meaning he felt that his faith, his commitment to his Christian ideals, told him that he should stand against Trump because Trump is very not acting in accordance with Christian ideals. So, what are you going to do? You're going to go with the Christian ideals of a guy who runs an evangelical magazine, or are you going to go with the Christian ideals of a guy who's cheated on every wife he ever had and hates people because of their skin color and all that other wonderful stuff that, we've had to contend with here? And speaking of bigoted stuff, let's talk about the Army-Navy game. So, the Army-Navy game was on, and some of the cadets in the crowd were making that, OK upside down symbol that means white power. And it caused a bit of uproar. It went viral, and the military decided to investigate its own. And in yet another case of the fox guarding the henhouse, they have, shocking nobody at all, decided that it was not actually racist, that it was just boys being boys. They said the students were participating in a, quote, sophomoric game, unquote, on Saturday and had no racist intent, despite the fact that they were flinging that obvious white power symbol. So, yes, the military has gotten on board with Trump's lack of honesty, and not only is there racism in the ranks of the academies, but their own parent service branches are covering it up, because why not? This is Trump's America. Fantastic. People always get on my case for not saying that anybody in uniform is automatically a hero. I got news for you. If somebody's flashing the white power symbol, doesn't matter what they're wearing, they're not a hero. And let's see. Moving along to other stuff that's happening in the United States. The United States is no longer the largest diplomatic nation in the world, with China now having more embassies around the globe than we do. Because they have decided, rightly, that winning hearts and minds is better than being a douche nozzle that pisses off all of its allies. So they are taking the smart plan, even as the United States circles the drain, diplomatically speaking. Absolutely mind-boggling that a brutal communist regime has become smarter about international relations than what is supposed to be the freest country in the world and a beacon of hope for all. So you guys should chew on that from the right wing. If you were so pleased with how President Trump is doing, maybe you should call the White House and ask him why communist China is making better headway diplomatically than we are and why we're falling by the wayside. Because, that seems like it's such a good thing for America's future. Okay, moving right along, in the argument about guns and safety, yet another shooting. A shooting at a city building was workplace violence. Salem, North Carolina, a deadly shooting at a city building in Winston-Salem, North Carolina was an act of workplace violence by one city employee who targeted another man he disliked for a long time. So in Trump's America, if you don't like somebody, apparently you're encouraged to shoot them or something. I don't know how that works, but apparently it ended with death and destruction here. Another city employee and an officer of the law were wounded but are expected to survive. The shooter was a 60-year-old who shot and killed another employee whom he had targeted. Fantastic. So the two of them had disliked each other for a long time, apparently. The source of their disagreement has not been revealed. But yeah, it's just yet another case where people are proving that they don't have enough impulse control to be trusted with firearms. So yeah, great. America, land of the free, home of the brave, etc. What else is going on here? Oh, so here's a great moment in Crime and Punishment. So, Louisville, Kentucky, a former Kentucky governor, Matt Bevin, had pardoned a man who was convicted of sexually assaulting a child, which has gotten a lot of people pissed off. Not surprisingly, because when you release a guy who's serving the second year of a 23-year prison sentence when he was been convicted of the R word, sodomy, and other sexual crimes against the child, he said there was no physical evidence of sexual assault, and here's the what it boils down to. I couldn't figure out for a while, and this is horrifying, but I couldn't figure out for a while what he could possibly mean when he said there was no evidence of a sexual assault, and apparently what he meant was The 9-year-old girl's hymen was intact. So, all the other physical symptoms that of this person being brutalized and, physical damage, tissue damage, all that kind of stuff is irrelevant to this clown because the hymen wasn't torn, because that's the sole arbiter in his mind of this stuff, indicating that he knows absolutely nothing about anatomy, is not a medical doctor, and should shut his trap. But he had pardoning authority and he let a convicted child rapist free because of an intact hymen. So guard your children if you live in Kentucky, because this guy will let their attackers go if, certain parts of their anatomy don't appear damaged enough to suit his definition of what a girl's body should look like after having been brutalized. So, yeah, congratulations on being everything that people expect of Kentucky. You moron jerkweed who lets criminals go without any reasonable cause. What a dork. Wow. Okay. So, in a bit of good news to try to bring us back up from that negativity, Twitter has apparently been trying to track where fake accounts are coming from that are trying to unduly influence things. And it says Twitter has identified and removed nearly 6,000 accounts it said were part of a coordinated effort by Saudi government agencies and individuals to advance the country's geopolitical interests. So it is cracking down on the use of Twitter accounts, Twitter bots, etc. to spread false information and propaganda. So good on that. Facebook said it removed hundreds of Facebook's accounts, groups, and pages linked to inauthentic behavior from different groups originating in the country of Georgia and one in Vietnam. So they are only scratching the surface here, but it's a good start to see that these two large social media companies are starting to take this stuff seriously enough to do mass deletions of accounts and pages and, anything that would allow these organizations to have the widespread influence that they have been seeking to advance their country's agendas or propaganda or disinformation campaigns. So that's definitely a plus. I'm kind of stoked about that. I hope it continues. I hope it's expanded. I hope that they find every single possible example of this kind of account and wipe them off their platforms entirely, because as you have probably heard, the 2016 elections were heavily influenced by outside parties using social media platforms to affect the outcome of the election, and that's something as Americans we should all be very concerned about, because we need free and fair elections to know what kind of leadership this country is supposed to have. And without elections that are free of outside interference, any result is suspect. So we need to do everything within our power to put a lid on that and end it. What else is going on? So the debate was last night. The last Democrat debate of the year was last night. And conspicuously absent was Tulsi Gabbard, which is not surprising considering the hot water that Tulsi Gabbard is in at the moment because of her vote on the impeachment 24 hours before the Democratic debate, when of all the Democrats, she was the only one to not vote yes or no or abstain. She simply said present, which is basically not showing enough spine to say no and not showing enough conviction of good sense and judgment to say yes, just kind of giving a finger to the entire process. She's falling apart in the polls, but there is a new theory floating around that Gabbard is trying to set herself up for running as a third-party candidate, which is leading to all kinds of conspiracy theories about her being backed by the Republicans to create division amongst the Democrat voters, and even theories about her being backed by the Democratic National Committee to sabotage any chance of a Bernie Sanders run because he is not establishment enough. So the rumors are flying, and only time will tell what's actually happening here. But if there's one thing we know for sure, it's that Gabbard basically ended any chance she has of winning the Democratic nomination by taking the coward's way out on the Wednesday night vote on whether or not to impeach the sitting president. So it's interesting to know. But there are a lot of little side facts that might stoke your imagination about what the real circumstance might be. one of which is that Gabbard comes from a well-established and long-standing family of Republicans, and that apparently the only reason she ran as a Democrat in Hawaii is because Hawaii is such a heavily Democrat state, and she knew that if she ran on the same party that her family espouses, that she would never have a chance of winning. So it's starting to look like Gabbard might be a turncoat in disguise, and again, we'll only know for sure as time progresses, but she's not looking very good to anybody at the moment. If she does decide to run a third-party candidacy, that will almost certainly ensure another round of Trump for 4 more years, because she will split the Democratic vote, and that would be devastating for the future of the country, so we can only hope that she is not going to do that. Let's see, what else? Yada, yada, yada. Okay, I had hoped to have Lady Raincloud come by tonight, because we've been talking about we were going to talk about some trans rights issues, but she hasn't shown up yet, so I don't know where she is or if she's coming. Let me see. I'll try reaching out one more time here. Hello, are you coming over? We are doing the show now. Okay, so we'll hope that she shows up. Let's take a quick look at the main pages for the Associated Press and CNN and see what's going on. Oh, yes, apparently Trump has finally inaugurated the Space Force. As useless as that is, it is a brand new branch of the American military services. Let's take a look at what this travesty is. Okay, Donald Trump celebrated on Friday the launch of Space Force, the first new military service in more than 70 years. In signing the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act that includes Space Force, Trump claimed a victory for one of his top national security priorities just 2 days after being impeached. It's part of a $1.4 trillion government spending package, which includes the Pentagon's budget. It also provides a stream of financing for the U.S.-Mexico border fence and reverses unpopular and unworkable automatic spending cuts to defense and domestic programs. Space is the new war-fighting domain, Trump said on Friday, stupidly enough, during a signing ceremony at Joint Base Andrews, just outside Washington. Among grave threats to our national security, American superiority in space is absolutely vital. And we're leading. But we're not leading by enough, and very shortly we'll be leading by a lot. You keep wondering if Trump thinks that we're subject to imminent alien invasion. Doubtful, but, I suppose anything's possible. But we have to know now that if the aliens do come to Independence Day the hell out of this planet, that Trump's Space Force will be there to save us all. Unbelievable. Yep, okay, so the reality is that the Pentagon's probably just going to use it for, managing satellites and satellite navigation and communication and such. It says here, Space Force is not designed or intended to put combat troops in space, which, thank goodness, because that would be one of the most idiotic things I had ever heard in my life. But that being the case, I don't understand why it needed to be separated out from the Air Force, which mostly controls our satellites anyway. But, whatever. Anything to wave a flag and try and get his supporters to freak out and cheer, I guess. So, yeah, Space Force. It's here, people. We have Space Force. Fabulous. Okay. What else is going on? Yeah, he's going to Florida. Who cares? Vaping stuff. Not really going to dig into that right now. We already talked about that. 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 Let's see what this is. Trump advisor says expect more aggressive poll watching in 2020. One of Trump's top re-election advisors told influential Republicans in swing state Wisconsin that the party has traditionally relied on voter suppression to compete in battleground states, according to an audio recording of a private event obtained by the Associated Press. That fact alone ought to be enough to get the Republicans off the ballot. if they're relying on voter suppression and have said it in a recorded phone call. Give me a break. Let's see, what else? Yeah, they're going to aggressively monitor the polling places on election day. She says, traditionally, it's always been Republicans suppressing votes in places, Clark said at the event. Let's start protecting our voters. We know where they are. Let's start playing offense a little. That's because, protection and offense are the same in his brain somehow. That's what you're going to see in 2020. It's going to be a much bigger program, a much more aggressive program, a much better funded program. Asked about the remarks by the Associated Press, Clark said he was referring to false accusations that the GOP engages in voter suppression. And that's interesting because that is exactly the opposite of what his own quote on the phone call seems to have said. Yeah, so crazy. It's 20 minutes of this. 20 minutes of leaked recorded phone call where they talk about suppressing votes. Unreal. And yet somehow nothing is going to happen to these guys. Nothing's going to come of this. There's not going to be any legal action taken. Nobody's going to raise an uproar. Nobody's going to care. And it's just going to continue on as is because that's America, apparently. What else? John Bon Jovi's raising funds for Cory Booker. Interesting. Not really world-shattering, but interesting. Alright, so I think that's all we're getting out of the Associated Press for the moment. Let's go over here to CNN. And let's do a quick refresh and see if we can get the most recent stuff. We already talked about the guy from Kentucky. What a douche nozzle. Prosecutor says it shocks the conscience. No surprise there. Look at this. Article after article about this guy saying that because the girl's hymen was intact that she couldn't have been raped. Unreal. Trump's tax cuts have failed Americans. No surprise there. It took 10 years, but Americans finally believe the economy is good, which only goes to show you how much they've been hoodwinked. You hear about the stock market being in the 20,000s, and of course what that leaves out is most Americans are not participating in the stock market, so those gains don't go to the average American in any way, shape, or form. Oh look, more racism. Let's read this one. Iowa woman said she ran over a 14-year-old girl because she, quote, was a Mexican, police say. An Iowa woman was charged with attempted murder after running over a 14-year-old girl, saying she did so because the teenager was a Mexican. Wow, how many names does this person have? Nicole Marie Poole Franklin, age 42, was arrested on other charges Thursday and admitted to Clive police she hit the girl with her vehicle on the 9th of December. The girl was walking to Indian Hills Junior High School when a vehicle drove onto the sidewalk, ran her over, and left the scene. Whew. The girl was injured but was able to return to school a week after the accident, so that's a plus. At least the girl wasn't killed. Because she's a Mexican. Poole Franklin then made a series of derogatory statements about Latinos, proving that not only can you be a racist idiot, but you can be a stupid racist idiot who's just going to shoot your mouth off once you're already in custody. Ugh, God. Authorities are looking at whether the crime was a hate crime. How can it be anything but a hate crime? She ran the girl over because she said she's Mexican. How is that anything other than a hate crime? Unreal. Oh, God. Unbelievable. Has a hearing at the end of the month. Okay, well, at least the woman's going through the criminal justice system. Can you even imagine running somebody over because they're a Mexican? What the hell is wrong with people? Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Two Carnival cruise ships collide in Mexico. That must have been a hell of a shock for the vacationers. Apparently, YouTube's highest earner at the moment is 8 years old. Ryan Kaji, who reviews toys on YouTube, has been named by Forbes as the platform's highest earner in 2019. His channel, Ryan's World, has 22.9 million subscribers and earned $26 million in 2019. Good for you, kid. Good for you. Heck yeah. Let's see that kid be successful. Great work, kid. Great work. You review those toys. Alright, what else we got? Alright, so I guess we may not see Lady Raincloud tonight, so we're going to have to delve into the LGBTQIA stuff without her. But starting with the basics here. So a Utah boy is speaking out after being berated by a substitute teacher for saying he was grateful for being adopted by his two dads, one of whom is a professional dancer from Dancing with the Stars. Daniel Van Amstel, 11, told CBS This Morning that he got angry when the teacher began insulting his family. Because it's not right. It's not nice to other families, even if you don't like them. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it, Daniel said. That's wisdom from an 11-year-old who has a bigger heart and more common sense than the substitute teacher. The unidentified woman began lecturing the class on her view that homosexuality is wrong after Daniel answered a question about what students were grateful for during a pre-Thanksgiving lesson on November 21st. So, substitute teacher and bigot decides to call out an 11-year-old. The teacher was escorted from the classroom after other students walked out of the room to get the principal, and later fired from the staffing company that contracted with the Alpine School District south of Salt Lake City. Good. Good. You do something that horrible, you deserve to be fired. Get rid of her. A classmate identified as Demi said everyone in the room was uncomfortable and Daniel looked scared, so she went to the principal's office when the teacher refused to stop. I want you to think about that. These kids are like 11 years old and had the guts to literally walk out on a bigot and go get an authority figure. Those kids have guts. Good for them. Father Louis Van Amstel, who has appeared on Dancing with the Stars, said the boy felt forced to remain silent during the teacher's diatribe because his adoption out of foster care had not yet been finalized. After 5 foster families and 1 failed adoption, the boy didn't want to risk losing the dads he'd lived with for 6 months. So this is a kid who's being terrorized by his teacher, who's scared that he'll lose the only family he's been happy with in his whole life, all because some teacher had to be a bigot. The adoption became final on Thursday. I'm thankful for my dad and dad, my family, my dogs, and everybody that I live with now, said Daniel. Great for you, kid. Louis Van Amstel said he doesn't know who the teacher is, but he'd have loved to have lunch with her to dispel misperceptions. How's that for a nice adult way of dealing with it? I'd have wanted to pop the person in the head for scaring the kid, but, that's a much more mature response than anything I'd have come up with. Daniel isn't ready for that. I do not like her. If I ever saw her again, I'd probably have a heart attack, he said. It doesn't matter what family you have. It just matters if you love them or not. And yes, I do love them. Good for you, kid. So now we have 2 stories about great kids. We got the YouTube kid and we got this brave kid and his classmates who stood up for what's right. Good work. Let's have a little positivity there. But now we get to the darker side of things. Students at the University of Virginia found a mural supporting black trans women defaced. The next day, they found it defaced again. So there's a mural saying, protect black trans women, which got defaced, and they came back the next day, and it was defaced a second time. A mural supporting black trans women near the University of Virginia was crossed out by a pro-gun message twice in 2 days, the university said. Because, of course, not only do you have to be a bigot, but apparently you have to be a gun-toting idiot bigot. The mural appeared on the Beta Bridge, which runs through the campus. UVA students frequently post art, write protests, and express free speech on the bridge. It's a tradition of expression that dates back decades. The mural, which read, "Protect Black Trans Women," was found defaced on December 14th with 2A written over the end of the word protect, the word guns written over trans, and the word women crossed out. So, jerks. UVA students rushed to paint over the defacement, an apparent reference to the Second Amendment, but it was found defaced in the same manner the next day. So, not content to be dicks once, these gun-toting, bigoted jerks felt they had to do it twice. I guess they're creatures of habit. Beta Bridge is long recognized public forum that may on occasion cause controversy or disagreement about the messages expressed or the intentions of individuals who choose to paint the bridge, the university said. We hope that community members will continue to honor the long-standing tradition of public expression in a way that respects every member of this community and the viewpoints they bring to grounds. The university has not launched an investigation because, of course not. Why would you launch an investigation to something that's obviously a defacement in the form of a hate crime? Because why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you investigate? You know, what? Because people suck, I guess. Charlottesville police spokesman Tyler Hahn told CNN that the incident is not likely to be investigated by law enforcement. So not only is the college not investigating, but the cops aren't either, because the messages on the bridge are considered free speech and the defacement didn't include threatening language. That is the worst misinterpretation, like the worst take on that you could possibly have, because if you are crossing out a phrase about protecting people and crossing out the word women, that you don't have to write I hate women. You're literally trying to negate them with the way you cross the words out. It's obviously hate speech. Unless someone is making a direct threat, it's protected speech and not a crime. No. Let's see. Marla Keisling, the executive director for the National Center for Transgender Equality, disagrees. There was plenty of other space to paint this. It's not free speech if you cross out a message of peace with a message of aggression. Exactly. At least 22 transgender people have been killed this year, according to the Human Rights Campaign. The organization said 91% of them were black women. 2/3 of all trans deaths since 2013 were gun-related. So once again, guns and bigots make a really bad combo. Members of the transgender community, and especially transgender women of color, are at elevated risk of violence, and acts such as this serve only to deepen an atmosphere of fear and alienation among these members of our UVA and Charlottesville communities, said the student body president. Degrading incidents like this one must not be tolerated and should instead direct us to protect and care for all fellow students and community members. Good for you, Ellie Brasaccio. Students who talk to CNN say they want a stronger response from the university. Good for them as well. Third-year student Emmanuel Ndumbe, a member of the university's Black Student Alliance, said the university's statement doesn't go far enough because it doesn't say what action would be taken to prevent a similar occurrence. The university condemns, but its statements don't change minds or actions. He said it needs to put students' minds at ease. So we have that going on at UVA, and then, in a surprise twist, J.K. Rowling, frequently known for being pro all good things, and Harry Potter author, is now catching a lot of flack for apparently expressing support for a woman who lost her job because she made transgender nasty comments. So apparently, the woman is named Maya Forstater, brought a claim against the Center for Global Development after she lost her job as a researcher following comments on Twitter criticizing UK government plans to allow people to self-identify their gender. Okay. Forstater does not believe that it is possible to change sex and that men who have undergone gender reassignment surgery are still men, even if the law recognizes them as women. I don't think people should be compelled to play along with literal delusions like, quote, trans women are women, unquote, she wrote in a private message to a coworker that was cited as evidence in the case. So the tribunal said Forstater's views are not protected as philosophical belief under the Equality Act. The employment judge, James Taylor, wrote in his judgment he considered Forstater's view to be absolutist and incompatible with human dignity and fundamental rights of others. Forstater stated on Twitter on Wednesday she believes sex is a biological fact and is immutable. There are two sexes, men are male, women are female. It is impossible to change sex. These were, until very recently, understood as basic facts of life. And then Rowling decides to step in and says on Twitter, dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who will have you, live your best life in peace and security. So far, so good, but then she adds this. But force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real? I stand with Maya and hashtag this is not a drill. So, yeah, apparently she had to add that last sentence and side with the transphobic bigot about having lost her job. It makes one wonder what Rowling would have said if the woman had been fired for saying something about people of color being lesser than Caucasians, but, you know, what are you going to do? Just mind-boggling. Number one, the woman should have lost her job for saying something so transphobic because it reflects badly on their employer, and employers do not have to put up with their reputation being besmirched by the stupid comments on social media of their employees. It's just stunning that Rowling would say something so insensitive, since she's usually so liberal and inclusive and, you know, not like that. So, just very surprising. Forstater is definitely in trouble. And let's see. So the Forstater woman's lawyer is trying to say it's a free speech and discrimination issue. But the reality is the woman's a transphobic bigot and decided to vomit that onto Twitter and got caught out for it, so she basically should just zip it and go try to find a new job. Rowling and her people have declined to comment so far. It's interesting. Forstater set up a fundraising page to pay for her lawyers, which has so far received more than 90,000 pounds sterling, which is about 117,500 US dollars in donations, which just goes to show you, if you're a big enough, famous enough bigot, that right-wing nutters will come out of the woodwork to help pay for your legal fees. So, congratulations on proving how many other people are douche nozzles that support you, Miss Forstater. Alright, so I do believe that is going to be most of the news for today to wrap up. But I do thank you guys for coming by. And oh wait, we have some comments here. Shin is here, and Simba. No, nobody here is against trans people. I am against people being jerks to trans people. I am against anybody being bigoted toward anybody. I think that what the people did by writing that stuff on that wall was horrible. I think that what that woman Forstater said was horrible, and I think that Rowling backing her up is horrible. I don't see why people have to be such asshats toward the trans community. And it's even more horrifying because they aren't just asshats toward them, they kill people in the trans community fairly regularly. And as we were reading a few minutes ago, trans women of color are like the overwhelming majority of murder victims from the trans community. But Simba, welcome. And Shin, welcome. Yeah, so was there anything we talked about that you wanted to go over? Since I hadn't seen too many people showing up tonight, I was going to wrap up a little early. But now that I have some people here who are actually engaged in the chat, I always want to make sure that you have a chance to ask whatever questions you like or have any topics discussed that you might want to delve into. So far tonight, we've talked about the clergy sex abuse scandal that's currently rocking the Vatican with over $4 billion worth of expected settlement charges. An evangelical Christian magazine saying Trump should be removed from office and Trump turning on his evangelical supporters because of that. We also talked about some white power symbols being thrown at the Army-Navy game and the military deciding it wasn't racist. What is what, Simba? Can you be more specific? We also talked about a Kentucky judge who pardoned a child rapist and how horrific that is. Waiting to see what Simba has to say. The first thing, okay, so the Vatican is the name of the organization that controls the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church has had a massive problem for decades with its priests raping small children, and they are currently getting like lots and lots and lots of legal cases, over 1,000 just this year, flung at them that could cost the Catholic Church over $4 billion in settlement money if these accusations are demonstrated to be true. Was that what you were asking about, Simba? Thea in Crazy. I'm not sure what you're saying there. So, one of the really awful parts about the sex abuse scandal with the Catholic Church is that the organization that's actually being charged with investigating this stuff is a part of the Catholic Church, which is what you call the fox guarding the henhouse. I don't think there's any real reason to expect that the Catholic Church will treat this with any more sincerity than it has in the past, which is a horrible thing to consider because these are child victims who sometimes have to wait decades for any chance of justice being served. It's okay, Simba, take your time. Can I home you, please? I'm not sure what you're asking. Oh, I cannot bring people into the live audio unless they're going to be guests on the show. Um, I would not be able to do that in your particular case for this show. You have to work through the chat for this. Well, this is definitely, grown up content stuff, and I don't want to bring anybody else into the live broadcast without having verification that they're okay with being broadcast and, with the subject matter and etc. So, yeah, we have the Catholic Church in deep doggy doo. We talked to. Okay, so there's a symbol you can make, which it looks like the OK symbol, where you put your thumb and forefinger together and show the other three fingers. But if it's upside down, it's a white power symbol. And some of the cadets at the American Army Navy game were showing that symbol from the crowd, like in the bleachers. And of course, people got pictures of it because it's a very heavily photographed event, and the pictures went viral, which embarrassed the living hell out of the Army and Navy. And they said, "Oh, we'll investigate it." And now they're saying it was just a sophomoric game, that there was no racist intent behind. And I'm sorry, but no, you don't just get to say there was no racist intent behind it when your cadets were throwing a white power symbol all over the Army Navy game bleachers. So that's another fox guarding the henhouse type thing where the military is basically protecting its own people instead of disciplining the offending cadets and like kicking them out of the academy for being racist bigots. Let's see, where is that? So yeah, a Navy probe of the event found that the students were participating in a quote sophomoric game on Saturday and had no racist intent. An Army statement also rejected any racist overtones, saying the hand gestures were not associated with ideologies or movements that are contrary to the Army values. Which is, of course, garbage because it was very blatantly the white power symbol. Let's see. We also talked about this travesty where a former governor of Kentucky released a child rapist, a guy who brutalized a 9-year-old, saying that there was no evidence of sexual assault because, he says, the girl's hymen was not damaged, which is just absolute bullshit because that's not what determines whether or not somebody was sexually assaulted. But he freed a guy who was supposed to serve 23 years in prison after 2 years, which has pissed off basically everybody in his state. That he let a child rapist out of jail stupidly. Like, just ridiculously stupidly. I know, right? Like, how can anybody think that? But yep, there it is. Former Kentucky governor pardoned child rapist because the 9-year-old victim's hymen was intact. You know. His claim was made despite expert studies showing most child victims do not show evidence of physical damage and that examination of the tissue is not a reliable test of sexual activity. And this other study found that 90% of child victims don't suffer the same kind of physical damage from sexual abuse that adults do. Yeah, so sentenced to 23 and let out in 2. So, yeah. Excuse me. Served fewer than 18 months. Less than 18 months. So, and like I said earlier, that just proves to everybody else what everyone thinks about Kentucky is pretty much true. Yeah. It's just bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. Yep. And then we have this wonderful article. Iowa woman runs over 14-year-old girl because she, quote, was a Mexican. Yeah. So literally, like, drove her car onto the sidewalk to run down this 14-year-old girl. And then after she was arrested, she continued to spout racial garbage about Latinos. I know, right? Welcome to America. And people wonder why I say that, Trump's America is a horrible place. Because people like these bigots have been emboldened to act out in ways they would never have even thought of a few years ago. But that's the country we live in now. And look at the face on this woman. She just looks like somebody you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. You know? Just absolutely looks like she's ready to run somebody over with a car. Which, she obviously was. I mean, look at that smug smile. Ugh. Here's a really funny part about this, and funny in a horrifying way. the authorities are looking at whether running the girl over was a hate crime. And as I said earlier, what other possibility is there when you run somebody over and when asked why you say because she was a Mexican? Like, how is that? How is there any question that that is a hate crime? How is there any confusion on that whatsoever? That, the statement from the authorities should have been, we're treating this as a hate crime, not we have to figure out whether it's a hate crime. Like, unreal. So, yeah, it's just been, one of those days here in America. Yeah, right? That's the kind of problem we have right now. We did have a couple of pieces of good news, though, I want to remind everybody. YouTube's biggest earner for 2019, 8-year-old kid who reviews toys, made $26 million. And I thought that was great. Good for that kid. Look at that happy kid. I hope that kid gets all the toys to review. Good job, kid. Good job. I guess it just goes to show that even if you're doing wholesome, decent content, you can do good on Facebook. You can make it big. So good for him. And a brave kid stands up for a verbal bashing by a substitute teacher. The kid has 2 gay fathers, right? And was in the process of getting adopted. And just before Thanksgiving, when the substitute teacher said, "What are you grateful for?" the kid said, "I'm grateful for my 2 dads." And the teacher went into this anti-gay rant. And to their credit, the kid's classmates literally walked out and got the principal, who came and hauled that substitute teacher out of there, fired her, and the substitute teaching agency fired her as well. His parents may be the ones organizing the show, but the kid's still the one on camera doing the reacting to the toys and evaluating them, so, that's good for the kid. But yeah, the kid was very brave. He sat there and didn't yell, didn't scream, he was very scared apparently because his adoption had not gone through yet, and he was afraid that if he spoke up, they might cancel the adoption somehow. Like, he didn't realize that was not a possibility. But the kid's classmates were right there for him and went and got the principal, and the principal basically planted his boot in that teacher's butt and threw right out of the school. So good on that bunch of kids, and good for that school principal. So yeah. And when later the kid named Daniel said, "I am thankful for my dad, my family, my dogs, and everybody that I live with now." So what a nice little kid, just grateful for everything. Good job, kid. Yeah, exactly. That's heartwarming stuff. It was a brave kid, brave classmates, standing up against a bad adult and coming out ahead. So I'm glad that happened. At least that the thing came out okay. I'm sorry the teacher went off on the kid that way. But I am glad the teacher got what was coming to her, and that the kid did okay, and the adoption went through, and their family unit is now secure. So that's a good thing. Let's see what else. Oh, so here's a fun one. We were talking about. In case you had any wonder about whether or not Republicans engage in voter suppression, meaning they try to keep people from voting, Madison, Wisconsin, one of President Donald Trump's top re-election advisors told influential Republicans in swing state Wisconsin that the party has traditionally relied on voter suppression to compete in battleground states, and said this on an audio recording of a private event. So there you go. Like I said earlier, nothing's going to happen to these people. They just literally got caught on a recording saying that they rig elections and suppress votes, but nothing's going to happen to them. Because, that's just the way things work now. Criminality, I guess, is just part of the game for the Republicans. But yeah, they just said it plainly. They thought they weren't being listened to, and oops, the recording got out. So, yep. Isn't all this fun? Isn't America just doing great? Oh, our poor country. Our poor country. But yes, there is still good in the world. I'm glad to see it coming from kids because as they get older, they'll replace some of these older, horrible people. You know? But all right, so I am going to wrap up for the evening. I do appreciate you coming by there, Simba. Um, sorry I can't bring you into the voice channel, but I am going to wrap up. I'll be back again on Monday with more gaming and more politics stream. So I hope you'll be here, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. You have a good night.